Please welcome to the stage, Mark Voisand.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. We're on the home straight. So as you can see from the photo montage, obviously the guys were working late putting all that stuff together, but you were working late to give them the content to assemble and all those interactions to build out and obviously deliver a beautiful experience on the back of this morning. So not quite real time, but damn close. I'd like to spend this morning really, on the one hand, recapping a couple of things that we've touched on, and then perhaps also give you some challenges and think about, as you kind of go home, what do you take moving forward? Because there's several things that we've done over the last 48 hours. For example, case in point, yesterday we had our first Impact Hackathon, and the guys built out a conversational chatbot interface. This is pretty cool. So all sorts of new innovation. We said innovators unite. These guys got together and came out with some new stuff. Louis talked a lot about, in his opening keynote, about the important drivers that your organizations have in terms of things like growth, fundamentally driving top-line growth, customers, improving the satisfaction for those customers, ensuring that they stay on board. And organizational importance, how to ensure that it's a great place to work. All of these things are top of mind for organizations these days. How do we help support that? Laurent spent some time talking about the platform that we've effectively built out to support these kind of initiatives. And I'm going to build on those concepts during the next 45 minutes or so. But the essence of it is that as our customers, and obviously our partners working with our customers, what you already have is an asset. In the Coveo that you've invested in today, you have an asset that is delivering a return. And what I hope to sort of tease out of you over the next session is that that asset can work harder. There are other things you could do with it, put it to work. There are initiatives that you can help foster inside your organizations to go beyond what it does today. And in so doing, we all kind of get more empowered and more inspired and create new and innovative experiences. So before we get into that, of course, the forward-looking statement, content presented at Coveo, yada, 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 and we can all read, so I'm not going to go through it, but for the sake of safe harbor, we may cover some stuff that you shouldn't make decisions on based on, future-based, done. Speaking of forward-looking, as I look forward to the next 45 minutes and look forward at you, I'm going to ask you guys for just a show of hands on this. So first and foremost, if you think that you're in a role that is fundamentally, let's call it an IT role, can you put your hand up? Okay, so I'm going to say about 20-25% of the audience, all right? If you think you're in a role that's, let's call it more of a line of business role, business-facing role, put your hand up. Okay, probably about half. Yep. Wow, these lights are bright. And by the way, these aren't mutually exclusive. If you regard yourself in, let's say, a senior leadership kind of role, put your hand up. Yep. Okay, so a couple of folks with, big titles out there. Good to see. Thank you. That's helpful. Bear that in mind, because, as we make this more personal, the notion of what role you have will inform the lens with which we have this conversation. So where am I going? Louis talked about this notion of relevance transformation, and really that's an evolution almost of having looked at the fact that there is a whole lot of noise around the term digital transformation. According to Sirius, it is the buzziest buzzword in B2B, which is a catchy little phrase, but it does sort of wrap it up. And this is nothing more than a snapshot of the kind of content that has been produced just on this topic. There have been webinars. There are entire analyst conferences. Forrester, for example, runs a digital transformation conference every year. And I forget, it's probably in its 5th or 6th year now. Gartner runs one as well. There's no shortage of information about this buzzword. And so, in the spirit of connecting to content and unifying it and trying to find the things that might be most relevant to our audience, we curated some of these, and I'm just going to take you on a little bit of a journey of sampling some of the findings in this work to perhaps put some data behind what is going on and how you can put this stuff to work. Because Every one of these things, I'm sure, is right, and no one's got the time to go through all of this stuff. But what is fundamental is that this transformation is real, and it's being driven, first and foremost, by what's going on in the market at a customer level. Example one, and I love this, because this is simple. Serious Decision says, digital transformation is simply the application of technology to enable business change. To enable business change. That's good. We can all live with that. We can embrace that. And perhaps what's interesting, though, is they also observe that the management of that business change is what companies struggle with. It's not actually the technology. Yeah, there's weirdness when you deploy all technology. It's not necessarily the processes, although the processes around them. It's very often the people. How does one manage change? Because that's fundamentally what digital transformation's around. It is the management of the people, the process, and the technology, not just the tech, right? And I think one of the things we see, and certainly we hear this back from the analyst community, and I'm sure this is familiar for yourselves, is that when that change management is overlooked, it impedes adoption. It impedes the progress of attaining milestones and goals and deliverables that one was hoping in the overall rollout of the project. So we cannot underestimate the importance of change management. Gartner has an interesting take on this, which is, in amongst the hype of digital transformation and everyone's got to disrupt themselves and all these words, not every organization necessarily needs to, transform to be a digital business. If I don't know, grow coffee beans, I can't digitize a plant. I can't digitize a coffee bean. And I can't digitize the taste of that caffeine as it goes down the back of my throat. Around the shopping experience of paying for that, acquiring it, and so on, absolutely. And we've seen those, and we'll touch on some of those shortly. But not everything gets digitized. What's important, though, is that every organization at least understands how to position itself to respond to those digital changes and those parameters. And I think one of the things we observe, and certainly the literature keeps referring back to this, is that some organizations think that this whole notion of transformation is purely a technology problem, and they delegate it to IT. So the IT folks in the room, this may ring a chord. You're like, oh God, I got dumped with that project, or I've been asked to explore this thing, and I'm not getting buy-in from my business counterparts. Corollary, you might be sitting there thinking, I'm going to ask IT to do that because it's about technology and I can't really understand it, and that happens. There's a risk here, which is that each functional organization, whether it's a sales team or a marketing group or whomever it happens to be, probably has a pretty good idea of the application, the technology stack, the people, the processes that they need to deliver their job. Whether that's, for example, a CRM system to get better productivity out of a sales force, or an improved CRM and support system to help customers. Whether it's a marketing automation system to improve the outbound communication. Every function has a pretty clear sense of the tools and the processes that they need to do that. But if you don't start to think about, well, how does this affect other folks? Or take a more proactive view of where it could influence, there's a risk of being marginalized in just that silo, and I'll talk about that. Because change itself has many, many forms. It's not just about changing how we improve the process to enable someone to find a piece of information quicker. Whoop-de-doo. That's tactical, right? If we think of change as being, for example, how we interact with each other, or changing how we work, or even changing who we are. These are sort of existential questions. What do I mean by that? Perhaps more prosaically, if we think of changing the way we interact, think of that as how do we relate to each other? How do we make business more personal? How do we, as organizations, think about the interplay, the relationship between sales and marketing and customers and prospects? And how does that improvement of the relationship get augmented through digital transformation initiatives? How does one become more relevant at every interaction that improves how we relate to each other? From an operational point of view, this could be about how does one improve the proficiency with which employees are able to do more on their own because they're empowered to make decisions. They're basing those decisions on solid, relevant information that is proactively and predictively coming at them. Yeah? How do you enable folks, for example, in a contact center to be operationally more efficient and proficient by giving them the tools for the job relevant to the case at hand? And then involving who we are, that's almost like how do you start to sense and hear the signals of what, for example, prospects or customers might be looking to you as an organization to provide that you don't yet? What are the signals in there of them looking for products that you don't supply? But that could inform what you might supply in the future. And that in turn could be even bigger than what you do today. Case in point, here we are in downtown San Francisco. Not far from here is Twitter's headquarters. And how many people know the origins of Twitter? Show of hands. Anyone know the history? Okay, so I've lived here for 15 years, so I've got a couple of these little anecdotes. Twitter was a side project at an ad agency. Seriously, it was a side project at an ad agency. They hacked it together over a weekend, played around with it, kind of turned it loose, were curious, and it grew like a weed. And the ad agency, no one even knows the name of it anymore. It is just buried in the annals of history. And Twitter became the product. So the point is that you can evolve and change like that based on signals and response and understanding. So the point about this is that these are fundamentally profound changes and can be driven and fostered through this notion of digital transformation.